Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a little chat about the origins of the romantic art song, better known auf Deutsch as Lieder, and in French as Mélodie. But really, Lieder, we're talking about the lead, the song with a capital L. Yeah, big capital L. Where did these suckers come from? Well, obviously, there have always been songs. We have songs going back to the 14th century or something like that. There were troubadours tootling around singing songs. And songs, as I have pointed out in other videos, are basically all the same thing. It doesn't matter whether it was a song written last year or a song written by Guillaume the cross-eyed, whoever the troubadour was. No, it makes no difference because songs are basically things with verses and refrains, a lot of them. Some of them can be through composed, and if they are, they're usually called durchkomponiert in German because it sounds more sophisticated than through composed. But, they're all about the same thing. They're all about sex, women, wanting women, not having women, having too much about women, not having enough sex, wanting more sex, getting less sex, dying of love, wanting love, I need love, I want love. That's what songs are. It's true, there are songs about other things. And I tend to particularly enjoy the songs about other things because I find them slightly more imaginative than the usual ones about sex and whatever. Needless to say, most composers of songs that have come down to us were men, and so the objects of their affection are women. But when it's the other way around, then it could very easily be women writing the songs and the objects of their affection are men. Sometimes the objects of their affection, is a pet. We don't want to go there, do we? Anyway, they could be about anything, but usually that's what they are. They're about affections, one way or another, and loneliness and loss and happiness and ecstasy, and that's what songs are. And they've been the same since the dawn of songdom, whenever that was in the misty past. However, the romantic art song is a specific genre, a specific thing, usually meant to be performed by voice with keyboard accompaniment. And one of the most fascinating things about them is that for most of us, the romantic art song begins with Schubert. Now, Schubert had contemporaries like, what was his name? Loewe, some of these other people. They wrote similar things. But we really only care about Schubert because, first of all, he wrote 600 of them and kind of cornered the market in songwriting in his period, and also because he was just so damn good at it. But there were some interesting precursors, and the most interesting of them is our good old friend Haydn. Yes, Haydn. Haydn was, in fact, one of the great forebearers of the romantic art song. And it's just so typical of Haydn. It really is. He didn't start writing songs, most of them, in German, obviously, until, and he was in his 40s or, fairly late in life. And they weren't terribly significant works. But when he went to England, he encountered some terrific lady poets. And we cannot underestimate the power of the feminine element. He had a mistress named Rebecca Schroeder, and he was very, very good friends with a lady named Anne Hunter, the wife of a surgeon who was a poet, among other things, a very, very accomplished lady of letters. And she wrote, in probably collaborating with Haydn, a series of texts in English. Not all of the English songs that Haydn set are by Anne Hunter. Some of them, one of them is Metastasio, translated into English. One of them is Shakespeare. But basically, there are 14 songs, and something like, I didn't count, but 10 to 12 of them are to poems by Anne Hunter. And the existence of the romantic art song owes really everything to the existence of romantic poetry. I mean, for example, if you look at C.P.E. Bach's songs, he's a wonderful example to compare to. All of his songs, and he published several collections, are religious poetry. That's what the kind of poetic literature. I mean, nowadays nobody reads poetic literature, but in those days people read poetic literature. That was the kind of poetic literature that middle class consumers of music most likely encountered. It was stuff of a sentimental religious nature. But the existence of the romantic art song owes its very being to the presence of lots of romantic poetry. One of the great romantic poets of the era was Goethe, of course, who wrote Erlkönig and a billion other sort of short, strophic, perfect for song settings, poems about subjects that were deep in gloom and mystery and Gothic horror and all of these things. And these things were not at all suited to the language of the classical period, the musical language, which was the language of Italian comic opera, basically. But these were poems that were in the vernacular, they were in the language of the country in question, and they dealt with all kinds of fabulous topics in terms that would not have suited your typical Italian comic opera aria. And so Anne Hunter was one of these types of poets. And the existence of the art song owes its existence, as I said, to the type of poetry that it set. And just looking at the poets who Schubert used, and now the poets who Haydn used, always including Shakespeare, who was like universal everywhere, really is a fascinating subject all by itself, which has been very, very considerably studied, obviously, from both a literary and a musical point of view. But I want to play you a couple of Haydn songs because they are extremely remarkable in his sensitivity to setting the text. The only reason that they have not gotten quite the acclaim that I think they deserve, although they're pretty well known, is because he wrote them in English, which means that in German-speaking lands, they don't qualify as Lieder. He called them canzonettas, and that's how they were published. 2 sets of 6 plus 2 single songs afterwards. And, they do not technically fall into the category of the romantic lead. But what's so fascinating about it is that Haydn, who was one of the ultimate evolutionary composers, whose ceaselessly questing spirit was only silenced by his death, at the very end of his compositional career in the 1790s, wrote these songs in a really, really new idiom. They foreshadow the idiom of Schubert so graphically and so effectively, and they are so unlike anything else that Haydn ever wrote that they're hard to categorize. And even people who like Haydn and collect Haydn don't always have a lot of luck wrapping their brains around how marvelous, just remarkably forward-thinking these songs are. But it is, of course, a hallmark of genius that they adapt themselves to the circumstances at hand. And the circumstances in this case were the existence of remarkable poems, and poems which required a certain kind of musical setting. And Haydn was happy to take on the challenge of finding the right music to fit the words. And for that reason, which is, of course, by the way, what makes a great song. You have the right music to fit the words. So what Haydn encountered was poetry the likes of which he had never had the opportunity to set. And so, oh boy, did he go for it with his typical lust for music and genius. I'm going to play 2 songs because I have this wonderful collection featuring Emma Kirkby, the fabulous Emma Kirkby, with Marcia Hadjimarkos. I don't even know how to pronounce this. You can see it here. There she is. And who actually produced the album, Marcia Hadjimarkos, on the forte piano. And it's funny, actually, that the songs were published with the accompaniment of a piano forte. They didn't call it a forte piano. They called it a piano forte. There we go. Take that, period instrument people. But this is a lovely recital in a very roomy acoustic, which some may object to, but I don't. I think it sounds just fine. And I need to read you the texts of the poems. I'm going to play you 2 complete songs. This is a brilliant classics release. These songs go in and out of the catalog like crazy. I already did a little talk on Ellie Ameling's complete Haydn song set, which is still the reference edition, if and when it ever reappears. But first we're going to play the Pastoral song. It's called A Pastoral Song. And you may know this song. I knew this song since I was a little kid. I don't even remember where I first heard it. I have no idea. It was just in the atmosphere. I just knew it. And it begins with the line, "My mother bids me bind my hair." I thought it was like a folk song. I didn't know anybody actually wrote the bloody thing. Turns out the poem is by Anne Hunter, and it was written by Haydn. And it gives you a wonderful example of the kind of poetry you're dealing with, the gently sentimental, touching, poems that Haydn was called upon to set. Some of them go considerably deeper than that. But let me just read you the words, all right? The words are, "My mother bids me bind my hair with bands of rosy hue, tie up my sleeves with ribbons rare, and lace my bodice blue. For why," she cries, "sit still and weep, while others dance and play? Alas, I scarce can go or creep, while Lubin is away." Second verse. "'Tis sad to think the days are gone when those we live were near. I sit upon this mossy stone and sigh when none can hear. And while I spin my flaxen thread and sing my simple lay, the village seems asleep or dead. Now Lubin is away." Ah, lucky Lubin. Anyway, here is the poem with a tune I'll bet you've heard before. But it just goes to show how marvelously Haydn catches the simple sense of the song, which is quasi-folk song in the opening line. But then as the words become more complex and more emotionally involved, the music harmonically opens out into marvelous vistas, unanticipated by the seemingly simple tone of the opening line. Have a listen to Emma Kirkby singing a pastoral song. lovely, isn't it? I mean, it's just a beautiful, beautiful song, and it could be one of those very, very folksy, simple Schubert type songs. I mean, it really could be. But the one I want you to hear is the Spirit Song. This is one of two songs that Haydn wrote before he left England. The Spirit Song and O Tuneful Voice is the other one, it's called. And they are songs of a very special emotional depth and quality. And Haydn, we've talked about this a little bit before. Haydn had his own personal minor key. That key was F minor. Whenever Haydn sets a text in the key of F minor, the words almost invariably deal with loneliness, abandonment, desolation of some kind, but really specifically the idea of being alone and isolated and usually abandoned. It's really fascinating. You can follow his F minor text settings and almost always find that this is true, which leads us to, speculate about what Haydn means when he writes purely instrumental music in that key, like the great F minor string quartet in Opus 20 and other places. It's an absolute constant throughout his career. And the Spirit Song is in F minor. And here is the text. It's a beautiful poem. Hark! Hark! What I tell to thee. Nor sorrow o'er the tomb. My spirit wanders free and waits till thine shall come. Ooh boy, yeah. All pensive and alone. Get it? Alone. Alone. I see thee sit and weep, thy head upon the stone where my cold ashes sleep. I watch thy speaking eyes and mark each falling tear. I catch thy passing sighs ere they are lost in air. Hark, hark, what I tell to thee. Nor sorrow o'er the tomb. My spirit wanders free and waits till thine shall come. Yeah, that's the kind of sort of Gothic romance type text that Romantic poetry specialized in. And, as usual, by the way, when we talk about musical periods, classical, romantic, and all that stuff, they don't coincide. They may overlap, but they don't coincide. For example, the Sturm und Drang period in literature really preceded its musical equivalent in Haydn and other composers of the day. And same with Romantic poetry, which goes pretty deeply into the 18th century, while the Romantic period music is squarely in the 19th century. But what they're talking about in all of these cases, which makes it romantic, is the immediacy of emotion, the personal expression thereof. And here you've got exactly the idea, that idea of loneliness and desolation. And here you've got two lonely characters. You've got a wandering spirit, a dead guy, and then you've got the dead guy's love who hangs out at the grave and cries all day. And the dead guy is waiting for the live lady to be a dead lady so the two of them can be together, theoretically. Anyway, that is sort of the essence of that Romantic poetic movement that Schubert was to make such a fantastic musical equivalent of. I mean, that's just what he did. And this is what Haydn does in this song. And it is an amazing song. I am serious. Play this song for your friends and ask them to guess the composer. It sounds more like Schubert than Schubert half the time. Just listen to it. It's amazing. Just amazing.
To.
dark, brooding German romanticism. It's so, what's the word? It's just so typical, so iconic, an example of its type, stereotypical, that it reminds me almost of, Anna Russell's fake German art song. Remember that? Schlumpf, Schlumpf ist meine gepitzigen Schnitz. Remember that thing? And it's just really one of those dark, heavy, gloomy, romantic things. And it's by Haydn. And it's inspired entirely by the sense of the text, by finding the music that suits the words. And that is, I think, a model that all of us can keep in mind in evaluating the effectiveness of a song. The best songs, the great songs, the classic songs, all have music and words that fit like a hand in a glove. And these songs do just that. And for that reason, they are among the earliest and most significant forebearers of the Schubertian Lied, the romantic art song. So I hope you've enjoyed this example, this little chat. And I just wanted to say once again, this excellent disc is Emma Kirkby with Marcia Haji Marcos singing Haydn songs and cantatas. There's also an unbelievable little cantata called Lines from the Battle of the Nile, about Admiral Nelson and whatnot. I mean, there's some great stuff in here, in addition to the songs, and they're fabulous works. You should hear them. It's on Brilliant Classics. I am grateful for the opportunity to use the music in these chats. And keep on listening, folks. Take care.